prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Let's close our eyes, opening our hearts, breathing deeply, and bringing ourselves fully present into this moment. Connecting with Jesus, feeling his loving presence with us, feeling the presence of the good spirits here with us, and asking for light to be in us and all around us as we prepare to open our hearts and minds to receive the gospel, to receive light, and to illuminate our paths as we make our way on this journey of evolution. May God bless all the brothers and sisters here with us on the spiritual and the physical plane. And may our hearts and energies and spirits remain open to the good. So it is. So welcome everyone to our public meeting tonight. We are only going to be presenting in English, so forgive me for those of you that, forgive me for the Portuguese speakers that my English is not good enough yet to present in Portuguese, but that's coming soon. I'm practicing a lot, so I hope that that time comes soon. Tonight we are going to be talking about the Gospel, chapter 18, and this is normally what we do when we did the Gospel before the pandemic. We would cover just individual parts of the Gospel, but now we're doing the entire chapter. So tonight will be an opportunity to learn the whole thing. Raphael, can you verify you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right. So the chapter 18 starts off with the parable of the wedding feast from Matthew, the 22nd chapter, where it says the kingdom of heaven is like a king who, not wanting to give his son a wedding feast, sent his servants, who wanting to give his son a wedding feast, sent his servants to call on those whom he had invited. However, they refused to come. And so, what was his response? The people that were invited, some went on vacation to their country homes. Some decided to attend to their businesses. And, this is kind of an interesting response, right? Imagine that, that you're invited to this big wedding feast and instead, and we know what the parallel is, you decide, oh, I'm going to go on vacation, or I'm going to go, attend to my business. And some even killed the messenger. Now, even in this parable setting, we can even think about ourselves, how many times, someone tries to give us good news or share valuable information with us, and we just shut that information down, right? And this is what has happened in this particular parable. And I think the question for us too is, when we are invited to a spiritual feast, some of us do go on vacation, right? We mentally go on vacation, or we just mentally check out and decide to attend a business. Or even when our loved ones want to get our attention. Let's think about that. How many times, even today, somebody we love that is trying to get our attention, and then still we're attending to our own business, or mentally we're imagining ourselves somewhere else, right? This is an important, this brings for us a lot about being fully present, because in this case, we are talking about a parable of the wedding party, but this applies to us even today. But at this particular time, this wedding hall was like full of people, and the king saw someone who was not wearing a wedding garment. And he asked the man, like, what's the reason for this? Why aren't you wearing a wedding garment? And the man doesn't even say anything. The man says absolutely nothing. And the king ordered that his hands and feet be bound and that he would be cast into the outer darkness. I mean, that seems like a lot for not having the right clothes, right? And so we have to realize that this is not about wearing clothes. And this isn't even really about a wedding feast, right? The meaning of this parable, we have to first stop and understand like the point of parables, because often it seems like they make no sense. But if we don't remove their outer covering, in order to find the hidden meaning, it won't make any sense. And we have to think about this. This brings so much to us just before we even start unpacking this parable. How many situations in our life that we take at face value and we don't remove the outer covering to see the hidden meaning, right? There are even people in our lives that show up to conversations or interactions with us, and what appears on the surface is not really what's happening. You know, we've even do it ourselves, right? Somebody asks us how we're doing. We say, fine, everything is fine. And on the outside is telling one story. On the inside, we are not fine. Or we see this happening with our friends and family and our loved ones, especially during this time when we're all quarantined. So it's good for us to stop and say, is what I'm seeing really what's happening? Right? This often happens with our suffering. We take our own suffering at face value. We don't even stop to remove the outer covering of it, right? Because many times we're suffering because we say, so-and-so did this to me, or I'm suffering because I'm a victim of this, or if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be suffering. So all of that is the outer covering. But if we remove that and look inside, we can find the hidden meaning. And this parable is no different, right? We have to peel off the outer covering in order to find the hidden meaning. And so the wedding feast is, in this allegory, is like the kingdom of heaven. You know, it's just like the state of spiritual plenty, the culmination of the evolution process, much like a wedding should be in corporeal life, right? And in corporeal life, we think that the wedding is a culmination of our spiritual connection to someone, right? And it's a state of spiritual plenty, right? It's this bond of love that we're stating a permanent attachment to. I mean, this is a beautiful thing. And now go back now, and there's folks that shot the messenger, decided they'd rather go on vacation or go to their country homes, right? Or rather attend to their business. And we do this all the time, even when we're called to do charity work or spiritual work. All of a sudden we have to work. We're choosing to work some extra hours, or we're choosing to take a vacation, or we're choosing to just not listen to the person who's asking. And sometimes what we even do, like with that kill the messenger thing, is somebody tells us a good truth, but because we don't want to listen, we attack the way that they said it. And if we're really good at that, we can now get into an argument about the delivery of the message and never listen to the truth. We're good at this. And so we have to be careful and watch ourselves, especially when we're being invited to a wedding feast. Because remember, the first guest, they'd rather take a vacation or attend their business and ignore the invitation. How many invitations to the good have we received that we've ignored? This is good for us to think about, right? We can understand that this is about a parable of a wedding feast thousands of years ago. But every day we have invitations too. We have to think about what we're doing. And these good people, these brothers and sisters just like us, completely absorbed by the material plane and indifferent towards the spiritual plane, chose to ignore, right? And in the Bible, these were the Hebrews. But how does this represent us today? Right? For us just to really think about, how many calls are we getting? How many invitations to the good? How many invitations to a spiritual wedding feast do we receive and we don't listen to, that we ignore, or we choose to prioritize other things, right, that are not leading us to the path that will take us to our own evolution? This is a really good question for us to answer internally, right? This is something that we answer inside. And so those messengers, who were those messengers that were sent by the king? If the initial invitees were the Hebrews, well, then who were the messengers sent by the king? Well, those were the prophets at that time, right? Those are the prophets and the disciples. And their warnings were scorned, and many of them were killed, like the ones in the parable. And this is like outright. This is no longer like a parable. This is literal. Many of the apostles and disciples at that time were killed, and nobody was listening to them. Their words were not listened to. But this brings for us a question. What about us? Who are we listening to? Some of us, we don't prioritize listening to good news. Right? We are we're good at prioritizing bad news. Some of us are so good at that we wake up in the morning and we turn on the TV for the news on the TV. That's not good news, right? That's Listen, what we learn, what we hear on the TV is a lot of suffering, a lot of hurting people and confused people, right, and misguided people. And starting our day that way, does that make sense, right? And what kind of TV do we watch? Do we watch TV or movies that are uplifting us inside? Because if it's not uplifting us, is certainly not something that's going to transform us in a positive way, but it's going to impact us. It's really important for us to think about who we're listening to and what we're listening to. And once we hear, like, what do we do with that knowledge? Because it's one thing to hear, right? And it's another thing to actually take action. And we know this all the time, right? We have conversations with people and it's clear that they're not listening to us, right? So we have to say, hey, did you hear me? And worse yet, when people are talking to us, like, we maybe listen with half an ear because the other ear is on vacation, thinking about work, right? Or thinking bad thoughts about the person who's speaking to us. But if we really do hear and we allow ourselves to hear the good message and we receive a good invitation, right? An invitation to do something good. What do we do with that knowledge? Because knowledge in and of itself is nothing, right? It's just another bit of data that we stack up in our knowledge storehouse, but knowledge by itself is nothing. We have to take action on that knowledge for it to actually bear fruit, for it to come alive, right? To me, knowledge is one thing and wisdom is entirely another. Knowledge is what you learn. It's the data that we accumulate. Wisdom is knowing how to apply that knowledge, to take action on that knowledge in a way that illuminates the good within us and brings good and love to everybody else. That's wisdom, which is something completely different than knowledge. We have a lot of people who know a lot that use that knowledge not for the good, right? That's not wisdom. That's just knowledge and an undeveloped moral character combined, right? Because the two are not synonymous with one another. But back to the wedding. So what about the other guests at the wedding? So who are they? So they were the people at that time that had not accepted or embraced Christianity, right? Because after the crucifixion, the apostles and disciples were spreading the gospel, and they were spreading it to who? The people that had not yet converted, right? So this were like the pagans and the polytheists and the regular people of that time who had not chosen to embrace the gospel. And so those who embraced the good news would have a seat at the table, right? So let's think about that. So we have this invitation. The invitation is first given to in this parable, the Hebrews who were very much attached to the material plane, which is why they say it is those who are working on vacation or just shot the messenger outright. Then the next round of people are the people who were the other guests who had not yet embraced Christianity, right? So these are for many of us, it's us. We may even say that we have, but we haven't necessarily put into application what we've learned, right? So, but those who were embracing it and who were living what they learned had a seat at this beautiful table, right? And think about embrace, right? We think embrace is like a hug, right? Like giving a hug. But this goes beyond listening, right? It means to hold someone with love. Think about that. To embrace Christianity, to embrace the gospel, is not just to hear it, is not just to listen to it, right? But it's also to hold the words and the teachings and the energy of the gospel with love, right? That's a different kind of energy. It's a different way to be with the gospel. And embrace also means to accept or support a belief willingly and enthusiastically, because now those two are different as well, right? You might ask me to do something and I say, fine, I'll do it, right? Or I can say, I would be happy to. It's my pleasure to help you. And let me know if you need anything else. I'm so happy to help, right? Both are willing, but one is enthusiastically. And what if I say, yes, I would love to. I'm here for you, my brother, my sister. I love you. And I'm going to do this task with as much love as I can. If I'm preparing food for you, I'm going to prepare it with so much love that when you eat this food, you're going to feel like I'm hugging you. That's very different, right? That's an embrace, right? Instead of just hearing and obeying. And we can approach our lives like this, right? It's not that we have to take the entire gospel and practice it all tonight. We can just take one piece. We can just love and just do what we're doing with love. That is a beautiful start on this path. And for many of us who have been on this path for a while, it's a beautiful thing to acknowledge our embracing our love for this path. So this brings for us a lot about our relationship with the gospel, right? Because some of us, we don't know how to stay in relationships, right? We love and leave. Some of us don't know how to have long-term relationships. For the gospel, right, that's the longest term relationship we'll ever have. It's going to surpass multiple existences and stay with us forever. So that's the ultimate wedding, right? Even though that's not what this is talking about, it's important for us to think if we are embracing something, would we embrace our loved ones with more love and care for a transitory physical experience than we would for something that is transforming our entire lives and bringing us up the evolutionary ladder? This is good for us to think about, right? This parable brings a lot of really good questions. We just have to remember to remove the outer covering, because this really isn't about a wedding that took place 2,000 years ago. What this is about is an opportunity for us to look at transforming our relationship to the gospel. So in this parable, right, there's also the wedding garment. Remember, so we have the Hebrews that were invited, and then they chose not to come. They made choices due to material issues. We have the people that came, that had their seat at the table. These were those that had embraced the gospel. Then we had the man that didn't have the wedding garment on, and then he was thrown out. So what does that garment mean? Let's unpack that a little bit. So according to the gospel, it's saying that it wasn't enough to simply accept the invitation and sit at the table and take part at the banquet, right? And if we think about us, right, it's not enough for us just to be invited. We come and we listen and we, allow ourselves to be fed by, the spiritual food we're receiving. That's not enough. That's a good start, but it's not enough, right? And before anything else, according to the gospel, it's necessary to be dressed in a wedding garment, which is an allegory for bringing that pure heart and to practice the law according to its spirit. So that's the garment. That's now when, remember, we talked about removing the outer covering so that we can get to the inner meaning of a parable. This is now the reverse of that. This is showing up with our whole heart, so that our heart is so big, our love for the truth and our actions are so loud that it covers us, right? And that's they say that we often don't have to say much about how we're living, right? We display that by who we are. And so this is an allegory relating to how we show up, right? How do we show up as we are practicing the gospel? And so this parable ends with saying that the law is contained in its entirety in these words. So the law meaning that we show up, we take our invitation, we have a seat at the table, we listen and partake, right? We receive the banquet, we receive our spiritual food. Is necessary that we show up with a pure heart and our willingness to practice the law. But then the law itself, what is that law? It says the law can be summed up in its entirety in these 5 words. Without charity, there is no salvation. So that is the love that we should have in our hearts, right? The understanding that we have in our hearts, that then will begin, as we begin to practice love, we begin to practice charity, will expand beyond us and be that wedding garment. I'll just pause here and see if anyone has any questions or comments. If anyone does, you can feel free to unmute yourself. I want to make sure there's opportunities for questions or comments. And let me know if there are. So this is why this is saying many are called, but few are chosen. Because this idea of showing up like this, showing up with our whole heart, showing up with an open heart, showing up with the willingness to understand without charity there's no salvation, and be able to act and see with eyes of love and act according to the law of love, that we see there's some difficulty there, right? So that's the part of the meaning of this chapter, many are called and few are chosen. So what about this outer darkness, right? Remember the man, he didn't have a wedding garment, so they bound his feet and they threw him into the outer darkness. What does this mean? So these words refer to the manifestation of the laws of cause and effect, to which none of us are exempt. The law of cause and effect is neutral. It applies to all of us equally. There's no escaping from it. There's no favorites. There's no preferences. The law of cause and effect is a neutral, universal, divine law. And so what shows up here is that, many of us hear the word, but very few of us practice it, right? Keep it and practice it. Because there's difficulty there, right? It's much easier to hear something and then tuck it away, right? We can hear something and choose to go to work. We can hear something, hear a word, a good invitation, and decide we're mentally going to go on vacation, right? We have all these reasons why we won't hear it and keep it. But if we do hear it, if we do keep it, that practicing part is where it gets difficult. I mean, it's easy to love when things are going good, but then remembering to love when things get difficult is when it becomes really challenging, right? That's, someone in our home now is not being kind to us. Ooh, now we have to practice the law of love, but we're annoyed and we're irritated. Or, something's happened at work and somebody is unjustly accusing us or taking credit for an idea or making things difficult, becoming an obstacle to the work we're trying to do. Do we remember to hold and practice that divine word then? This is for us. This is our work. The practicing of it is where all of the work is. But we have to keep this, hold this in our consciousness, because it says here that those who remain indifferent, right, to the knowledge and practice of the spiritual teachings will have painful reincarnations for the redemption of their souls. So this is what's on the other side for us if we choose not to practice what we've heard, because we can't unlearn what we already know, right? So now that we know, we are responsible for that, right? And this remaining indifferent, indifferent is like when you're presented with a problem or suffering and you just don't care. You see somebody suffering and you walk on by. In the not this last study, not the study we're in right now, but the last Saturday study that I was in, that was the Get to Know Spiritism for the spring semester. And one of the inner Reformation practices was the prayer we said was to dissolve and thaw indifference in us, is to melt that indifference, because we kind of have this wall of indifference around us, all of us do, where we just don't care enough. We either just don't care enough to assist in the alleviation of the suffering of our brothers and sisters, or we care, but we're afraid to let that wall of indifference down because we're afraid that it will be too painful to see or to experience or to become proximate or close to the suffering of our brothers and sisters. And we don't want to experience that, right? So we have to understand that indifference is a choice that we are accountable to the law of cause and effect for. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want that indifference? To be treated with indifference. We've all had that experience where we've been suffering and someone has made it known to us that they just don't care. Like, that's a really hurtful place to be, right? It's a painful place to be. So we want to make sure that not only that we don't remain indifferent to the knowledge and practice, right, of the teachings, but also that we don't remain indifferent to each other, to the indifferent of the suffering of our brothers and sisters. There's that saying that, how can you say you love God who you've never seen, but you don't love your brother or sister who you see every day, right? It with the love and the application of the spiritual teaching starts with us, with each other. This isn't like some magnificent thing that's happening in the sky. It starts with us. When we, we're already home, right? But when we leave this meeting and we start interacting with our loved ones again, what choices will we make about how indifferent we will be to their suffering? Right? That's something for us to think about. So the gospel, chapter 18, has a few parts in it, right? So there's the parable of the wedding feast, and then there's the narrow door. So, and this is from Matthew chapter 7, and Jesus tells us that the door to perdition is wide, and that the path leading to it is broad, and that there are many who enter through it, and that we should enter through the narrow door. And so perdition is one of those kind of old-fashioned words that means like the like suffering and and darkness and pain, right? Excruciating pain. And so it's interesting, right, that door is wide, right? Because there's many who enter through it. And Jesus is telling us specifically, we have a direct instruction. He gives us another 5 words. It's simple instruction. Enter through the narrow door. Just 5 simple words. So we're going to talk more about what the difference between these 2 doors are. But before we pass, there's something I was thinking about here about the narrow door. When I look at this narrow door, I'm not a small woman. I'm a physically large woman, right? And I thought about, what stops us from entering the narrow door, right? I just thought about from the physical plane. We know this is a spiritual conversation, but I had to just think about the physical plane for a minute. I like to eat, right? I'm overeating a little bit too much during this pandemic, like I know some of us are, and we need to get a hold of that, right? We definitely need to get a hold of that. But I thought about, so the narrow door, there can be some difficulty, right? I mean, I'm like, can I squeeze through that door with the physical size that I am right now? I mean, how much do I have to hold in my stomach to try and squeeze through that door? And I thought about, well, what about all the excess baggage, right? Maybe this isn't the physical baggage, but, that's on my physical body. But a lot of us just have a lot of stuff, right? We have a lot of baggage we're carrying with us. It's not you ever had a big suitcase and you try to get it through a door? You have to kind of maneuver, but if it's a big wide door, you can just drag that suitcase through. And then also, right, that wide door, there's a lot of people going through there. And some of us, we don't always intentionally choose to think critically. We don't always intentionally choose to use our rational faith. And if we see there's something called social proof, where if you see a whole bunch of people doing something, that must be the thing to do. We see this all the time, right? And so the narrow door is no different than that. So I was just thinking about that when I was looking at that picture, because I was like, ooh, I wonder if I could even fit through there. But this is a spiritual allegory. So what's the wide door, right? And this picture kind of gives us a clue, right? It's the door to the lower realm, and it involves the attachments to the material plane. And there's all these are just some of the representations. And many of us spend a lot of time thinking about these things. I recall reading some words of Saint Ignatius when he talked about after he had the injury to his knee. He had a bad injury to his leg and was in the hospital. I think he had to even have part of his leg removed. And he couldn't wait to get out of the hospital because he was wealthy, a wealthy soldier, and an upper class person, right? An upper classman, a patrician. And so he would lay in bed. This is his words, or his article about him. He was saying that he loved laying in his bed thinking about the women and his money, his wealth and his money, and the parties that he would throw and how much fun he would have when he got better. And while he was thinking about it, he would feel really good. But then when he was done thinking about it, he didn't feel good anymore, right? So that attachment, right? The feelings of attachment and the thinking about the acquisition of these material things made him feel good. But when he was done, because you think about things for a while and then you stop thinking about them, he didn't feel good anymore. But when he would read the stories of the saints at that time in his bed, he would feel really good reading the stories of the saints and their spiritual elevation. But when he was done reading those stories, he still felt good for a long time, right? So this is an interesting parallel for us, right? Because we know this door is wide because there's a large number of people who follow their material passions, right? There's a lot. I mean, this is the kind of world we live in right now, right? And that's why this is fed to us so much. And there's also this large number of temptations, right? So there's this combination of three things, right? There is this big wide door with a big, huge path to it. There's a lot of people on the path there, and a lot of people on the path are those that are very much attached to physical possessions, to thinking about them, to acquiring them, to once they have them, to then think about what? Enjoying them? No, got to get more, right? Got to improve, upgrade, 2.0, 3.0, right? And then there's the larger, it seems like the more we accumulate, the more new gadgets and widgets there are out there. So this is a powerful combination of attributes of the wide door that we have to be watchful for. And we were specifically instructed to not take that wide door. Jesus specifically said to choose the narrow door, right? So what is that narrow door, right? This is the only path that leads to spiritual evolution. And this door is narrow because those who want to go through it have to make a great effort to control themselves, right? And that's a difficult thing. You know, self-control is difficult, right? And if it wasn't so difficult, more of us would do it. But like anything else, it gets easier the more that we do it, right? But the requirement to be able to control ourselves first requires our capacity, you know, and to be able to walk through the door requires the capacity to see beyond the physical realm, right? So the thread throughout this talk tonight, as we started out, was this capacity to remove the outer covering of a situation and to be able to see to its real truth, right? So we know we're not talking about physical doors here, right? That we're talking about choices that we make. And we're either making a choice that's going to help us spiritually or not. But to make a choice that's going to help us spiritually usually means that we're giving up, you know, attachment and focus on some of these things, which are very, you know, they have a strong lure, right? And we have to control ourselves by being willing to see beyond the physical realm, and also be willing to resign ourselves to do the necessary work. Because the necessary work to get through there, right? The necessary work to get through there is that work of controlling ourselves and elevating our thoughts and our beliefs and actions above the material into the spiritual. It's choosing, instead of to being indifferent, it's choosing to love. It's choosing, instead of to ignore and go on vacation or work or shoot the messenger, to hear and obey and take action on what we've heard. I think this is a duplicate slide. I'm going to click through that. All right. So the law of progress. So, you know, this is like, how do we get from that wide door to the narrow door, right? We have to think about this. If we allowed ourselves to be led by the law of progress, right, and align ourselves to the law of progress, which again is that all the spiritual and divine laws are neutral. There's no favorites. You can't purchase favors. Like, there's no preferential treatment. All the laws apply to us equally. Just like a lot of the physical laws on earth, gravity doesn't care about you. Gravity works in alignment with the physical laws. The light switch, it doesn't care who touches it as long as it's connected to a light circuit with a working light bulb and the light bill is paid, right? The laws are just like that. They're just neutral spiritual laws that apply to all of us. And when we understand the law of progress, that will help us to begin to understand the need for us to evolve. Because here's the thing. I remember at this actual event, the Conconference in Massachusetts last year, I think. Last year. That the speaker there said, you know, that we will evolve. We'll either stay stuck or we'll move forward, but nobody goes backwards. I remember being very struck by that, and my studies have shown that to be true, right? That we either stay stuck or we will. We have a couple of choices about how we evolve. We can do it quickly, or we can do it slowly, and we could drag our feet, right, and stop every once in a while, or we could just move. But we will evolve. That's the law of progress, right? And what is hopefully will give us some comfort is that right in this moment, you know, we're the best version of ourselves that we've ever been, right? We are always evolving, right? We don't go backwards. So that means like right now, we might be moving slowly. We might be stuck, right? Or we might be moving at a decent clip. But at this moment, we're the best that we've ever been. What would happen if we chose to intentionally improve ourselves tonight? What would happen if we applied just one thing that we've talked about and just for the rest of the evening treat our loved ones with love and without indifference? What if we did that, right? Well, we have to be willing, right? And we invoke the law of progress by our willingness. We have to be willing to follow the path that leads to the narrow door. And then what happens is that path becomes less difficult. It doesn't mean that it becomes easy, but when we are willing to do the work, when we're willing to work on ourselves, when we are willing to love our brothers and sisters and love our family members without indifference, when we're willing to do the work of charity that ends suffering, we have a lot of help. It brings a lot of light to our souls. And it's not that the work gets less difficult, but we change inside. The difficulty of the work is our resistance to it. And when we become willing, then we have so much grace and so much light in our souls with us. And we've all experienced it at some point. Those of us that are applying this work, you've felt that. And that's the grace that we receive from being willing to do the work. We receive grace and help when we when we are willing to apply what we are learning. So the earth right now is transforming, right? It's currently an inferior world, right? We know that we're a world of trials and expiations, but it's undergoing a transformation to a world of regeneration. And this transformation will be complete when the narrow door becomes the wide door, because it will be the predominant choice. Right now, the wide door is the one of the one that is not the good, because we're in a world where there is more evil than good. And it's up to us to be part of this transformation. It's up to us to choose to walk the path to that narrow door. And when enough of us do that, then what also helps to transform this planet and to change the nature of that wide door to the one where good is predominant. I'll pause for another minute and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Okay. So the next parable in this chapter is to whom much is given, much is required. And it says, the servant who knew his master's will, but did not prepare himself or do the work will be harshly punished. But the one who did not know his master's will, but who did things worthy of punishment, will be punished less. So this doesn't make sense at first, right? Like, how could somebody who did more evil, not get punished? Once again, we have to peel off, right? This may not make sense, but we have to peel off the outer covering to get to the inner meaning. And this is tantamount as we grow on our path to practicing what we are learning. So what does this mean, right? So when it comes to the divine laws, the responsibility of our actions are proportional to the knowledge that we have acquired, right? And the knowledge and material goods that we get from God should be used in accordance to divine laws. So let's talk about what that means. We have a responsibility to act on what we know, right? If we have learned, as we've learned tonight, right? Some of us have learned things we didn't know. Some of us, maybe a lot of us, are just getting a review, right? I know I learned some things in preparing for tonight. I'm not a master of any of this. I'm a student like everyone else, right? I'm learning. But every single thing that I've learned, I'm now responsible. And to the degree, right? To the degree of what I know, my responsibility increases. And what I know and the things that I've accumulated, right, are here to be used in accordance with divine laws, right? So therein lies this meaning, right? To whom much is given, much is required. And I think it's important to talk a little bit. I know Angiata has done a couple of lectures now about divine justice, and I think she's mentioned this a few weeks back, that there's less rigor in divine justice when we are ignorant of our choices, right? And the rigor in the application of that justice increases the more that we learn. We're held accountable to what we know, right? And so the more we know, right, the more that's required of us, and the more we feel it. And so it makes us think about, well, there's this old saying in America, right? Ignorance is bliss, right? Is that what this means? Like, would it be better for us to just know less so that we would have less responsibility? There are some who might think this, right? But this choice only delays our progress. We can choose to not grow, right? We can't stop. We don't go backwards. We're not going to regress, but we can choose to stop, right? And if we are choosing to be ignorant, that is the equivalent, right, to stopping. And the thing we have to remember is that not only are we responsible for our honest mistakes, but we're also responsible for idleness, right? And for omission, the things that we choose not to do. And we're also responsible for bad will, because we're not only going to answer for the evil that we did, but also for the good that we are already capable of and choose not to do, that we choose to do otherwise. And this goes back to that indifference, right? We talked earlier tonight about, being able to walk past someone who's suffering and just not care, or to be asked for assistance. Someone asks us for help. We are indifferent. We don't care. We prefer to work. We prefer to think about vacation. We prefer to acquire material things, or think about the acquisition of our things, or think about the things we've already acquired and we want to spend time tinkering with instead of doing the thing that's being asked of us. That indifference is not ignorance. So let's make sure we know that we know the difference, right? Because we are accountable and we'll answer for the good that we are already capable of and choose to do otherwise. So it's not just being indifferent. Sometimes it's just outright refusal. We have to watch for that. And so, yes, is that a question?
No, I just want to say that I was watching a movie, and it was like a teacher, teaching the kids, and he said something in the lines of bad things happen when good people do nothing. Or something like bad things happen when good people, refuse to step up and do something to help, in situations like that.
Wow, what movie was this?
It's actually it's a Netflix show. It's like it's Hallmark something. I can send you the name of it. When Calls the Heart is the name.
Bad things happen when good people do nothing. That is powerful, right? And there's also I have another saying that I've heard in the social sciences. It says, "What you permit, you promote." So it's the same thing. If we allow bad things to happen, we're promoting that. It's an interesting way to think about it. I love that. When good people do nothing, bad things happen. Well, there it is. And I love that, Andriata. Thank you. So then that begs the question, right? Does Spiritist knowledge mean more responsibility? It does, right? Because the callings that we receive are numerous. And I think it was Flavia that said this, right? Like, God is always online, right? It's us that, we receive the calls and we like click ignore and, let it roll to voicemail, right? Put our phone on silent, put it on vibrate and leave the phone somewhere, right? But the number of calls and the number of those chosen is multiplied as we exercise our rational faith, not the blind faith that's automatically assuming without investigation. Because think about it, a good chunk of that is what happens on the wide door, right? That's the good people who are, that door has a lot of traffic. So that looks like that must be the place to go. That's blind faith. Nobody's investigating what's happening on the other side of that door. But once we investigate and we have that knowledge, and we understand that there's a rational reason for us to embrace the good and to go through the narrow door, we're now working on rational faith. And when we do that, the number of us chosen increases as well, right? And the other thing that Spiritist knowledge also provides us with greater joy if well practiced. Remember the lesson of St. Ignatius of Dom Inácio de Loyola, right? Of St. Ignatius of Loyola. He said when he thought about the material stuff, he felt great. But when he was done, not so great. When he was studying the spiritual works, he felt great. When he was done, he still felt good and felt joy. That lasted for a long time. And I think we can also bear witness to this, right? We've all taken vacations, right? But if I said, what vacation did you take in 2012? Would you remember? right? If I said, oh, what were the dates of your last vacation? Would you remember the dates? Like that just fades to oblivion. We might have had fun wherever we traveled, right? But there's no joy in that now. But those of us that practice charity work, right? When you do charity work, that good feeling, you might be tired. You have to give up a vacation. You got to give up some work, but you do the work. And then when you're done, you're tired. But it's a good tired and you feel good inside because it's all that light in our souls that we receive. So this is the joy, one of the greatest joys that we can receive now, right? And in our current book study for Not So Large, the whole message of the book is just the joy that we receive in work. It's the bread of blessings, the spiritual bread and blessing of work. Right? Because it fills us with such a good joy to know that we are executing on our duty and we don't have that voice of our consciousness going, you should have done this, you should have done this. We can be at peace inside, right? And it's not that we need to do this work to go searching for joy. I once heard someone say there's no peace in searching for joy, but there is joy in pursuing peace, right? So there's something for us to think about. And the reality is, we have received much, those of us with Spiritist knowledge. Much will be asked of us. And the answer to that question is only we know. What will we say? Will we hear and ignore? Will we hear and become too busy, prefer to, accumulate material advantages and take vacations? Will we be indifferent? Will we see suffering and ignore it? Right? It's up to us. Each one of us has that choice. But there was a warning that Jesus gave to the disciples, right? And what he told them specifically was to pay close attention to what you hear, because the same measure will be used on you that you have used to measure others, and you will be given even more. Now, what does that mean? He says, for to him who already has, more will be given. And regarding him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And this is from Mark, the 4th chapter. So what does this mean, really? Like, is it God who's taking things away? Is that what Jesus is telling us? Once again, we have to remove the outer covering and look at what's the real meaning here. And that's what's so beautiful about this book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, is it takes the lessons and messages of Jesus and helps us unpack the parables and translates them in a way for us to be able to apply them instantly without any confusion. And this is really clear and straightforward, right? And so the responsibility is on us, right? So we can't lose what we don't have, right? If we haven't acquired knowledge, wisdom, and the merit of the choices of going through the narrow door, we can't lose it. We can only lose what we already have, right? And remember, we talked earlier about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Knowledge is you've accumulated information. Wisdom is knowing how to apply that information, that knowledge, in a way that uplifts and transforms us spiritually and everyone around us. But once we achieve it, right? Achieve knowledge, we achieve wisdom, we have the merit of repeatedly choosing love and doing good, which is like walking through the narrow door, then we do receive more. And I think it's that grace, right? It's that grace of when we decide to work with the brothers and sisters who are doing good, and we align ourselves with our spiritual friends on the spiritual plane who are doing good, we have help. We become part of a team of light, and it doesn't make our work gets any easier. Like, it doesn't make the work any easier, but we have help, and we have a lightness in our soul that helps keep us uplifted as we do the work, right? And we have that peace of mind of knowing that we're doing the work. Pause here for see if any other questions or comments. I think we're almost done. We just have a couple more slides. Okay. So this is a request from a spirit friend, and that's literally how the spiritual friend describes him or herself in the gospel. It says, "Take up your hoes and your plows, till your hearts, pull up the weeds from it, and sow there the good seed that the Lord has entrusted to you, and the dew of love will enable it to produce the fruits of charity. Such a beautiful analogy, right? If we think about our heart, right, and and what grows in there, right? The kind of thoughts that we think and what that produces in our hearts, and the kinds of actions that we take and what that produces in our hearts, and the willingness to love and show love. What does that produce in our hearts? I mean, we're always planting, right? Every thought, we're planting a seed in our heart. Every action, we're planting a seed. And so, hoes, the purpose of a hoe is to kind of dig up the weeds, right? So that's for us to be really thoughtful and start to chip away at the mental thoughts of the material plane. Like St. Ignatius realized, thinking about the material only brought temporary joy. Studying the spiritual brought permanent joy. So he began to use that hoe to kind of dig up those weeds that were those thoughts of the material plane. And then the plow is like that big machine that that softens the soil, right? Because if the soils of our hearts are really hard, some of us are really hard-hearted and indifferent, right? That's a place for us to grow. We've all been there at some point or another. Some of us even today, right? We use this plow, right, to soften the soil of our heart. That's what that means, right? And the plow is our study, right? That's what we're doing tonight. Just our willingness to show up tonight and have a fraternal conversation about the gospel is already like softening this landscape of our heart. And then to sow there the good seed. So now we're taking these seeds, these good teachings, these learnings from Jesus, these messages from the spirits, and each one of those is a seed that we plant in our heart, right? And these good seeds, they come from, they come from Jesus. The everything in here, right? This is the gospel, the gospel of Jesus. And according to Spiritism is what the different spirits have supplemented to help explain to us how to put this into practice. Because just knowing it doesn't help, it's putting it into practice that makes it work. And this dew of love, right? That's the willingness to walk through the open door. That's the being willing to do, not DEW, which is the water, right? That is produced on plants in the morning or in the evening. But this is an allegory to doing something, to taking action. Once we plant all the seeds and we soften our hearts, we plant the seeds to actually take the action, the dew of love, doing this work with love is what produces the fruits of charity. So that's what we have time for tonight. This is a blessing from Simeon. It says, may the Lord of blessings bless you. May the God of light illumine you. May the tree of life abundantly shed its fruit over you. Believe and pray. So thank you so much for attending to the lecture tonight. I'll pause to see if we have any other questions or comments before we go to the Pass.
Thank you, Cara, very much for tonight's talk. Was a really nice, really good message. Thank you for all you put to prepare this to us.
Thank you so much, Rafael.
Thank you, Cara. This was a wonderful talk. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ana Paula. Okay. So I believe, anyone else have any questions or comments? Check the chat. Okay. Aw. Thank you, Ana Claudia. Glad you are here. Alrighty, so I think we'll go to the passes now. I just want to invite you all to get water if you haven't done so. I believe Angiata will be leading us in the pass.
Let us now take a moment for a meditation to calm down and go inside ourselves to receive the blessing of the passes. We begin the pass by breathing slowly and deeply, relaxing body and mind. Let go of your worries and thoughts for a moment. We raise our thoughts to Jesus by tuning in with the good spiritual friends. Let's put ourselves in prayer. Ask God, our Father, for the presence of the guardian angel and friendly spirits by your side in this moment. We ask them to assist all the homes here represented. We ask God to allow us to receive healing rays for all physical body ailments, stopping any action of infirmities through the application of vibrations of rays of light throughout our being. We now proceed to the dispersion pass. Let's imagine a crystal clear water falling over us, full of blessings, involving our whole body, removing all the negativity and all the negative energy, thoughts, and feelings, penetrating and involving our entire body, organs, cells, and our centers of force, restoring our energies. Detaching ourselves from all hurt and anger, nervous tension, guilt, sadness and frustration, afflictions and anxiety. Allow the action of this cleansing by putting all your difficulties and sensations in the hands of the emissaries of the Christ. We feel ourselves spiritually clean. Involve in this moment the entire environment of your home, opening the doors to cleanliness and releasing all feelings of selfishness and possession. May this water clean the spiritual environment of your home from all forms of ill thoughts and feelings that may disharmonize ourselves and our family members. Dear God, embrace our hearts, giving everyone good intuitions and freeing us from all evil. We now proceed to the replenishing path. After cleaning, feeling light and happy to be free, we start the streaming phase, restoring all our energies. Let the light of love fall upon us by rays of restoration of our whole being, helping us re-energize both morally and spiritually. Visualize the team of spiritual doctors around your physical and spiritual body, receiving lights that provide beneficial and strengthening energies. Through breathing, through the pores of your body, and through your mental thoughts, strengthening your immune systems, restoring to balance all of your organic activities, bringing encouragement and well-being to your body. Let's thank Jesus and the whole team of good spirits, asking for this light of healing and blessings for us all and for all the humanity, and involving all the sick and distress for the trials of the earth at this time. Let's unite our thoughts of love to be an instrument of support so that the good spirits can act on everyone who needs it. Pass in name of Jesus. At this moment, we imagine hospitals and everyone there receiving this healing support, the homes of the sick and those who remain silent, still feeling the actions of disease. We know that God acts in all of us. May His will be done. May the water that we set in our table now be blessed by the hands of good spiritual brothers, workers of the Christ, bringing the benefits to our spiritual and physical bodies. Thank you, God. Let's now close tonight, thanking God for this beautiful lesson, asking our mentors to help us to do our inner reformation so we can look inside of ourselves, work always in service of good, always in service of God, being helpful and coming to aid and rescue our brothers and sisters who are in pain or who are in need. May we go back to our family members, showing kindness towards them, towards our co-workers, and towards every single person that we will interact during this week. May we all be blessed. So be it.